Dragged by an 8,000-ton boat. One of the most miraculous stories of being lost underwater is that of Scottish diver Chris Lemons, an oil rig worker who was working in the North Sea when his oxygen cord was severed. The incident occurred when the ship to which he was attached began to drift, the result of strong winds combined with a technical failure on board. The 8,000-ton boat, set adrift, dragged Chris along the seabed. Chris's oxygen cord became tangled in the structure he had been working on and disconnected from his diving suit. This also disconnected the power from his headlamp, throwing him into complete darkness at a depth of around 330 feet, as well as cutting off his supply of warmth. His communication line with the dive supervisor was also severed. This left him completely and utterly alone, with little hope of survival. The suit contained around 5 minutes of oxygen, but the rescue would take at least half an hour. Chris later told the BBC that he accepted there was no hope of survival, saying, quote, "I was powerless to do anything to save myself. A quiet resignation came over me. I remembered it being a period of great sadness, really, of disbelief. I thought of everybody at home, and the chaos I would cause." Having accepted his impending death, Chris lay down on the seabed, where he fell unconscious. As the rescue crew finally reached Chris, they fully expected to retrieve a corpse. However, after mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, Chris, against all odds, awoke. The suit's highly concentrated oxygen had saturated his skin tissues and leached into his body enough that he was able to survive for the necessary half an hour. His recovery was so remarkable that he returned to diving just 3 weeks later. Pisces III. Pisces III was a small deep-sea submersible, which in 1973 had been employed to bury telephone cables in the seabed off the coast of Ireland. The Pisces III measured just 20 feet long by 7 feet wide. After being purchased by Vickers Oceanics, the submersible's tail fins were removed to improve access for maintenance. At the time, nobody could have anticipated the life and death implications that this decision would have. The Pisces III was piloted by a 2-man British crew consisting of 28-year-old Roger Chapman and 35-year-old Roger Mallinson on August 29 when it ran into trouble. The 2 divers completed their 8-hour night shift laying cable on the seabed, and a ship was in the process of lifting them back to the surface by their tow line. It was just after 9 a.m. when the 2 pilots heard an alarm, followed by the sound of water gushing into the aft sphere, a self-contained compartment reserved for machinery and fuel. The tow line had inadvertently wrenched open the aft sphere hatch, and more than a ton of water had flooded in, an event that the presence of tail fins might have avoided. The added weight sank the sub rapidly, and it rushed toward the seabed, striking it at over 40 miles per hour before settling upside down at a depth of around 1,575 feet. Fortunately, the sub's oxygen tank had recently been replaced, and the crew had 66 hours worth of air. However, the crew knew the rescue mission would take days, so they conserved oxygen by not talking or moving. Trapped in a compartment of the sub with a diameter of just 6 feet, the 2 men had a single cheese sandwich and 1 can of lemonade. Meanwhile, dive crews were attempting to locate the vessel. One team member said, quote, "We knew where the haystack was, just not the needle." Even once the rescue team had located Pisces III, it took 3 separate dives and a second submersible to attach a new tow line. It was at this point that Mallinson and Chapman finally allowed themselves to eat their sandwich. The rescue of Pisces III is a relatively rare example of a successful deep-sea rescue. Upon opening the hatch at the surface, they checked the oxygen tank and found that it had just 12 minutes of oxygen left inside. Two days underwater. In 2013, 3 divers were given the unenviable task of recovering the bodies of the crew of a tugboat that had capsized off the Nigerian coast. There were assumed to be no survivors. The vessel had hit choppy waters, and the crew of 12 was hit by a rogue wave that snapped the cable connecting it to the oil tanker it was pulling, capsizing the boat. At the time, the ship's cook, 29-year-old Harrison O'Keefe, was in the bathroom, whereas other crew members were locked in their cabins, a precaution against piracy, which was commonplace in these waters. This precaution, however, sealed their fate. O'Keen was knocked over by the ship's momentum, but he found a pocket of air in the engineer's office as the vessel sank to a depth of around 100 feet. O'Keen faced an unknown weight while trapped in a small, cold, wet room with no food or drinkable water and a dangerously dwindling supply of oxygen. The air pocket was just a few feet high, and it was becoming increasingly contaminated with CO2 as O'Keen exhaled. To escape the freezing waters and a painful death at the hands of hypothermia, O'Keen managed to fashion a small platform that kept him just above water level. Having lost track of time, O'Keen didn't know how long he had been there. He survived in his air pocket for almost 3 days, passing the time reminiscing and praying for rescue. While in pitch darkness at the bottom of the ocean, O'Keen could hear fish penetrating the overturned vessel and feasting on the corpses of his crewmates. After a time, O'Keen's prayers were answered, and a shaft of torchlight penetrated the darkness. Tony Walker, one of the 3 divers clearing the wreck, later described the moment he first saw Harrison O'Keen, quote, "Suddenly this hand appeared. We thought it was another body, and when the diver went to grab the hand grabbed the diver." Ultimately, 10 bodies were found, and 1 remains missing. Recalling his experience, O'Keen later stated, quote, "When I am at home, sometimes it feels like the bed I'm sleeping in is sinking. I think I'm still in the sea again. I jump up and I scream." Tham Luang Cave. On June 23, 2018, a crisis began that spanned 2 weeks and riveted viewers around the world. A Thai youth soccer team consisting of 12 boys and their coach had gone on a caving trip and become trapped deep within a mountain. Known as Tham Luang, this is the 4th biggest cave system in all of Thailand. The boys and their coach had previously entered the cave on several occasions, even venturing as far as 8 kilometers in, and as they stashed their bikes and bags at the entrance, they had no reason to expect that this visit would be any different. This particular cave, while seemingly trivial at first, can suddenly become extremely dangerous during rainy seasons as water floods in from all over the mountain. The soccer team, known as the Wild Boars, found the water levels within the cave rapidly rising. Their exit had been cut off, and they were forced to retreat further inside. Eventually, around 4 kilometers from the entrance, the boys found themselves stranded on a rocky shelf, keeping them clear of the rising water. As local authorities were alerted and search parties were formed, the boys found themselves losing track of time due to sensory deprivation brought on by the darkness. The Boars successfully carved away a portion of the rock face so that they could huddle together. The coach guided the team through meditation exercises in order to conserve oxygen and remain calm. Clean water dripping down the cave walls provided essential fluids, and the boys sustained themselves by drinking it and eating insects. Outside the cave, rescuers had begun an unprecedented operation. The Thai Navy, however, had little experience with diving and failed to reach any significant distance into the cave. Engineers tried to pump the water out, but could not lay their hands on suitable equipment. By this point, the eyes of the world were on the boys, and international assistance soon came in the form of specialist cave divers from across Europe. The divers searched the caves for days, systematically following the meandering passages and twisting tunnels. At last, they found the Wild Boars. Quote, "We smelt them before we saw or heard them," said one diver, before reporting back that all 13 were alive. Numerous methods of getting the boys out were explored. Ultimately, it was decided that the boys would be drugged for the 3-hour journey back to the entrance in the hands of the expert divers. While the boys were rescued relatively unscathed, not all the volunteer divers were so lucky. 2 Thai rescuers died, one from a blood infection contracted in the cave, and the other by drowning after becoming trapped in a flooded passage. Titan Sub. June 2023 bore witness to a gripping international saga. A submersible vessel carrying tourists and explorers on a deep-sea journey to the hallowed wreck of the Titanic disappeared without a trace. The world anxiously followed the story, holding its collective breath as the Ocean Gate Expedition's custom-made Titan submarine, bearing a 5-man crew, vanished into the depths. The Titan, a 23,000-pound craft engineered from titanium and filament-wound carbon fiber, had previously proved capable of withstanding the crushing pressures of the deep ocean, and the submarine's website boasted of the vessel's safety and comfort. Yet controversy loomed. OceanGate's CEO, Stockton Rush, admitted in 2021 that he had bypassed certain conventions in the design of the Titan sub. Although carbon fiber has found significant application in the aerospace industry, its ability to repeatedly endure deep-sea pressures remained unverified. It was in this scenario that the Titan, operated via a video game controller, lost contact with its surface ship, failing to return at the agreed time. The Coast Guard was alerted, and a full-fledged search was launched the next day, led by US and Canadian vessels, aircraft, and remote-operated robots. OceanGate disclosed that the sub's oxygen supply could last 96 hours, igniting a race against time for rescue operations. A collaborative multinational effort scoured the ocean surface and its intimidating depths. Yet, with each passing day, the clues to Titan's location and the status of its crew were scarce. Hopes for a fortunate turn of events began to dwindle. Search leaders informed the media and public, acknowledging the slim chances of crew survival and highlighting the notoriously harsh environment where the Titan disappeared. Amid the frantic search, troubling details began to emerge. Safety concerns regarding the Titan had been raised as early as 2018. The company's director of marine operations had voiced concerns about the potential risks to passengers in the face of extreme depths, but his warnings were brushed aside. Adding to the mounting dread, it was revealed that the Titan was uncertified for its mission. Despite completing deep dives during testing, OceanGate had bypassed necessary precautions, dubiously citing innovation as the justification. A glimmer of hope emerged in the form of unexplained banging sounds detected by sonobuoys deployed in the Atlantic. The race against time heightened, and after 5 grueling days, a deep-sea robot finally discovered debris scattered around 500 meters from the Titanic's bow. As fragments of the Titan came to light, the grim reality became evident. The sub had catastrophically imploded. The tragic news was delivered at a press conference, confirming the loss of the Titan's pressure chamber and the presumed death of all crew members. The mystery of the source of the banging sounds lingers, and it remains uncertain whether the bodies of the lost explorers will ever be retrieved. Now, a painstaking investigation into the tragic incident begins, aiming to assign blame and seek answers. One haunting thought prevails. In their final moments, did the doomed explorers indeed gaze upon the legendary Titanic? Which of these underwater scenarios scares you the most? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thank you for watching Dark 5. Like and subscribe to continue exploring the greatest mysteries of this world and beyond.